The Secrets of Star Trek is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous supporters. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/donate. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, episode number 19.
Captain to bridge.
Spock here.
Make it so. Surrender is not an option.
Attention crew of the Enterprise, this is James Kirk.
We are all explorers, driven to know what's over the horizon, what's beyond our own shores.
We would have helped you get home if you had asked. That's who Starfleet is.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're wrapping up our overview discussions of all of the Star Trek series. We've done all of them from the original series. We previously had talked about, and you'll find in your podcast feed, our previous two-part discussion of the first season of Discovery. That's why that's not coming. We've already done that, and we've done the original series and Next Gen and all that, all the way up to today's topic, which is Enterprise, that polarizing series that some fans love, some fans hate. It's kind of like The Last Jedi for Star Wars fans. So we're going to have a good discussion on that. And joining me today, as always, on the panel are Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Corey Stika. Hi, Father Corey.
How's it going?
Great. So first, I want to thank folks for subscribing to the podcast feed, downloading this episode, and I want to ask you to do a couple of things for us. First, if you could like this on social media, wherever you see it, like on our Facebook page or on Twitter, to retweet it. If you're listening on YouTube, to like it there and to subscribe to the YouTube channel and hit the bell for the get notifications. I'm presuming that most people subscribe to the podcast instead of just listening online as it comes out. But if you haven't subscribed, please do. That helps us know how many people are listening. But also, even more important, is to share this with other folks. The only effective way we have of growing the audience is if you folks help us by sharing the podcast with other people, letting other Star Trek fans know that this is here and that you're enjoying it. And then to go to iTunes and write a review. Write us a 5-star review because that alerts the algorithm that runs the iTunes podcast directory that here's something that people are liking. You should show this to more people. So listen to us on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, all those different places, and let people know that we're here. And I really appreciate that. So that said, let's start our discussion of Star Trek Enterprise. So
I have a question about that.
Okay.
Yeah, you said in the introduction that fans either love this or hate this. Do any fans actually love this? I mean, I know some hate it, but I can't think of any who is like, oh, Enterprise is the best series ever. For a lot of fans, it's just okay.
Yeah. You would be surprised. There are people who love everything. Like there's just like in love and marriage, there's somebody for everyone. There's somebody for Enterprise. Like there are fans out there who love Enterprise, just the way it is.
Okay,
I'm definitely not in the love it phase. I'm in the so much potential wasted and finally started to get good, and then they canceled it phase.
Yeah. I guess we could start there. Let me start with some of the basic information. So, in case you weren't, you're too young to remember, or you weren't a Star Trek fan then. Enterprise broadcast from 2001 to 2005. So as Voyager was ending, Enterprise was coming. It aired on UPN, the same network that Voyager aired on. It lasted 4 seasons, and it's a prequel series that features the first Starship Enterprise, although not the first ship named Enterprise. Of course, we've had many ships named Enterprise, including. I just want to note here. I'm going to name drop my great grandfather and his brothers, who lived in Nova Scotia, were French Canadian, owned a ship named Enterprise. So it was my destiny to be a Star Trek fan. So
Okay.
I just wanted to throw that in there.
At least you have an excuse.
Exactly. So, so that's the basic plot is the story of the first Starship Enterprise. I mean, that's the most basic, one sentence.
So this story is set in the 2100s, for the most part, around 2150.
Yes, 2150 to 55 because of the 4 seasons. What was sorry, Father Corey? I forgot. What was it you were saying that I was interrupting you to give the basic information?
No. You didn't interrupt me. I just, it really is a series that it had so much potential.
Yes.
I mean, it really did. There was so much they could have covered. I think one of the biggest complaints about it is they never did anything with the Romulans.
Very little.
Very little. This is right before the time of the Romulan War, was supposed to have happened.
And that was my criticism of the whole series right from the beginning. I said that what they needed to do was tell us the story of the Romulan War and the founding of the Federation, which is what we knew was going to happen. When they announced the new series was going to be a prequel, I was so excited. I thought, finally, we get to see this pivotal moment in Federation history. And then, nope, what the fans really want is another show about a ship going, gee whiz, let's explore the galaxy. But I've seen several series already about ships going, gee whiz, let's explore the galaxy. That's not what I'm interested in seeing at this point.
And don't forget, making sure to have very sexy scenes with the very sexy Vulcan science.
That was
and all the antibacterial goo they were smearing on each other in the decon chamber.
So I don't want to jump too far ahead. I mean, these are all things I want to kind of address as we go along here, because each of these deserves to be dissected in detail. So let's start at the very start of this, which is and probably the thing that a lot of fans kind of put a bad taste in their mouth right from the beginning, right before they even saw a character on screen, was the theme song. It was, for the first time, it was not an orchestral soundtrack.
You mean you didn't like Going Down the Long Road?
It was a pop song, and a bad pop song.
It was kind of like a minor song that Rod Stewart had recorded,
Yeah, and the first time that there was a song with lyrics, although we know now that that we've been told that the original Alexander Courage theme song for the original series had lyrics, although some people say that was a back explanation that they didn't really. Someone
we kind of discussed that a little bit.
What happened there? I've read the lyrics to the original, and they're bad, and they were written by Gene Roddenberry simply so he could claim co-author credit for the original theme tune and thus get royalties off of it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So thankfully, we never had to listen to those while it was airing. But this one, a lot of fans really disliked it. They tweaked it in the third and fourth season, but not enough because we still had to hear it. The lyrics are the song is called "Where My Heart Will Take Me," and but
everyone thinks of it as the Faith of the Heart song because that's the recurring lyric in it.
And it's just as cheesy as you imagine it. It just is. Ugh.
There's a little subjectivity there. I don't mind the song particularly. I mean, I wouldn't have gone with it. It wouldn't have been my choice, but it's not the thing that makes me angry about this series.
Well, I think, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure, like I said, there's a fan for everything, and I'm sure there are some fans who are really angry about it. But for me, it sort of symbolizes how they bungled things coming out of the gate.
Yeah. And related to that, something else and I think actually the credits, which, it's a montage of images showing us the history of spaceflight.
Yeah.
And that's reasonable. That makes sense given that this is supposed to be the first Warp 5 ship. And so
not just space flight, but it's ships named Enterprise. So going all the way back to the British, sailing ship Enterprise.
Right. But so that historical montage, that makes sense to me. But then when they get to the end of the credits in the first 2 seasons, it just says Enterprise. And that's the name of the series. There is no Star Trek.
Right.
And they were clearly trying to distance themselves and do something new and fresh, but they also damaged their brand at the same time.
Right. Their brand needs to be Star Trek.
Yeah, if you're looking through your TV guide back when they had TV guides and people used them, and you see the word Enterprise, unless you're a hardcore fan, you don't know that's Star Trek, and you don't know to tune in.
And that could be a show about some corporation, like Dallas and corporations, or it could be,
could be anything.
Who knows?
Well, and the thing is, this is 2001 to 2005. This was a low point for Star Trek. I mean, this is the same time period where they made Star Trek Nemesis, the movie that almost killed Star Trek movies. I mean, it was by many people's standards. We're not really talking about Nemesis right now. That'll be a separate episode. But, by many people's standards, it was one of the worst Star Trek movies because, for various reasons.
It was better than Insurrection.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll agree with that. I will agree with that.
Two movies that basically killed the franchise until J.J. Abrams rebooted his Kelvin universe. But it certainly killed next gen Star Trek films. But again, bad period of time for Star Trek. And this was just part of it. Kind of a case of how the mighty has fallen, because it went from the height of DS9 to the low of Enterprise in 5 years,
with Voyager as a step down in between.
Exactly.
But I mean, that's a quick drop.
Now, this series is sort of based on or builds off of something that was from Star Trek First Contact, which was the first time that humans encountered Vulcans. That was sort of that was the point of Star Trek First Contact. The plot point it revolved around.
That was the First Contact.
Yes. And so this movie sort of builds off of that, like 100 years later, after the first, warp drive ship and that First Contact. And now we're like 100 years after that. And now, there's this, we built in this tension right from the beginning, this Vulcan human tension. And there are many humans who feel like the Vulcans have been keeping humanity down. And I'm thinking, is this really where we want to go? So, where we want to create the enemy to be the Vulcans, who are like one of the best friends of humanity in all of Star Trek?
Well, okay, so let's talk about that, because the Vulcans are Mr. Spock is like one of the best friends of humanity. But we've seen a lot of Vulcans who have a lot of attitude and even though they're on the side of the Federation, they're not the easiest people to deal with, even in later series. And this is before there is a Federation for them to be on the side of.
Sure.
So I think it's defensible. There are similar criticisms about Star Trek Discovery that, this isn't what we're used to. Well, if it was what you're used to, go watch the old DVDs. Because each series needs to distinguish itself in some way. And it makes sense to say, look, we're 100 years before the time of the original series. Don't expect everything to be the way it was in the original series. Expect there to be some things that will be different that will then progress towards the way they were in the original series. Discovery had the same thing. We're eventually going to get to where we are in the original series, but don't expect it to all be identical. And I think it's defensible to say we had, given the kind of prickly nature of Vulcans, I mean, look at the Spock-McCoy relationship. We could have a prickly beginning with them that would take a while to iron out.
I will grant you that it's okay to have a progression. I just think from a storytelling point of view, you've starting off by the first officer, who once again is a Vulcan, not very original, but she's very arrogant, condescending, and every Vulcan we encounter is arrogant, condescending, and it kind of grates a little, though. I know. Over the course
of the series, she gets sympathetic, and we meet some sympathetic Vulcans.
And it's sort of I know we talked about the Roddenberry rule, where there's no conflict among the crew, and now they've clearly wanted to get away from that, and we have this conflict here between T'Pol and the others, where they don't really trust her in the beginning. So I feel like it's a tricky storytelling. I think it contributed to the difficulties that the show experienced.
And I would agree with that. I would agree with that. However, I also see the benefit of putting it in there because we got to remember that Vulcans live longer than humans do, that we humans are seen in the stellar scale as being very brash and, a little too quick. There you go. That's a good way to put it. And so I think it really, it could have been done well. Could have been. I'm not going to argue it was done well, but it could have done well to show humanity as they're taking these first real steps into interstellar space that they prove themselves, that humanity proves itself to the Vulcans and to other species.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it makes sense and flows from the end of Star Trek First Contact because there the Vulcans have the superior technology. They're the superior spacefaring race, and we're the newcomers who've just invented warp drive. And given what we know about Vulcans and their highly logical approach to things, even though they're not as logical as they will come to be after the Vulcan Reformation, they still are not going to, if they're not going to look on us and go, oh, wow, exciting new race. Let's help them go everywhere and do everything all at once. The natural inclination of any established power to a rising power is to want to sit on it and limit it. And Vulcans especially are going to look at us and say, wow, illogical yahoos, we need to monitor them closely.
Humanity was the equivalent of a bunch of guys in a pickup truck with a gun rack and a deer strap.
Hey, y'all watch this.
You say that like it's a bad thing.
Well, no, just from a point of view of the Vulcans, who were the equivalent of some folks in Harvard Square. Let's put it that way.
And I almost kind of see it too as almost like mentors to apprentices, that they saw themselves as mentors to humanity in taking good steps.
Right. Well,
I mean, that's the Vulcan approach, was saying is humanity is going to go out into the stars. Let's make sure they do it in a way that protects the stars, but also protects humanity.
Given that when they first met us, we had just, been reduced to nearly Stone Age, coming up out of World War, probably not unexpected that they would take that approach. But so I agree with what you're saying. I feel like the feel of the Vulcans, and especially of T'Pol at the beginning, may have contributed to some of the difficulties. Early
no
on.
Disagreement there. Absolutely no disagreement there.
So speaking of T'Pol, and you brought this up earlier, Father Corey, clearly T'Pol was supposed to cash in on the 7 of 9 aesthetic from Voyager. She was emotionless, wore cat suits, was a very attractive woman. And then they put her in these situations, like we mentioned, where because they weren't using the transporter, we'll talk about that in a bit. We'll talk about the technology in a bit. They had to take shuttlecraft, and so they were the transporters in later Star Trek was presumed to have a biofilter that filters out any bad things. And so very logical. This is actually nice that they thought of this, that, well, they'd have to try to filter out any bad things coming back up from planets with them. So they have to use this treatment to spread this goo all over themselves. Except they put them in the same room and they're spreading it on each other. And it's like
naked,
slow motion.
And I'm like, did they not have their own rooms? Like, do they have to do this communally? It was very clearly.
Couldn't this be a mist or something? Or,
exactly.
A shower?
Like, are you spreading this in every pore and your eyes and your hair?
Which they clearly aren't. Right. Which harms the believability of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was clearly a titillation sort of ramp up the sexual tension sort of stuff, which ends up creating actually in later seasons, we get this relationship between T'Pol and Tucker, the chief engineer.
Which actually I thought was fine, although they brought it in a different way. It didn't have anything to do with the decon chamber.
Right.
It was other issues, but I like that relationship. I thought that was a good relationship for them to build. Yeah.
There's such a contrast between them that it was a very interesting relationship.
It's like the Worf, Deanna Troi relationship.
Yeah.
And in both cases, the actresses didn't like the relationship. Marina Sirtis didn't like it. Didn't like having her character having a relationship with Worf. Jolene Blalock didn't like her character having a relationship with Tucker. And I think in both cases, the actresses missed what was fascinating about the relationship. It was a real extreme case of opposites attract.
Yeah.
Right.
One of the objections could be, and I think I've seen some, is that why do women always have to enter into relationships to be interesting? Interesting characters.
Well, I don't think they do. I mean, right. I thought T'Pol was interesting before, but that doesn't mean I didn't think this was an interesting development for her character.
Right, and certainly the other part of the relationship has to be, in these cases, has been a guy. Yeah. So
yeah, I thought Trip got more interesting too when he was in the relationship.
Right. So we kind of skipped over the lead character, the captain, Captain Archer, played by. I always can never Scott Bakula. I'm sorry, folks. I'm terrible with names. Scott Bakula, who older folks may remember from Quantum Leap. Younger folks know him from NCIS New Orleans. What do you think?
I haven't seen that one.
I've only seen the first half of the season. I kind of gave up on NCIS.
I've seen a few of it. It's not too bad.
What do you think of Scott Bakula as Captain Archer?
I think he's really great. I like Scott Bakula. I like his Captain Archer. And according to everybody on the crew, he was like the nicest guy. Like he is unlike some actors who are kind of prima donnas or overly stiff. I'm thinking William Shatner and John and Patrick Stewart.
Right.
Scott Bakula has a reputation for being a humble, sweet, down to earth guy who would even do stuff like help the crew load boxes back on the truck at the end of the day.
Oh, don't let the union know that.
No kidding. Yeah. Well, what about you, Father Cory? What do you think of Archer?
I agree. I mean, I liked the way Scott Bakula played him. I liked, the approach that they had with him where he wasn't gung-ho. But he wanted to get out there. What I didn't like, and fortunately, I think they cut this very quickly, was they tried to find opportunities for him to have the epic speech.
Right.
The quotable speech of the day.
The Voyager syndrome.
Yeah.
Leave that to Jeff Winger.
And I'm glad they cut that out very quickly. But I think it was a good character.
I actually liked the plot point of his dog. I mean, I like the fact it made him humanized him in many ways. Like, here's this guy who, he's the captain. It's a lonely place to be the captain. It should be sort of a lonely position. He has to stand above the crew, apart from the crew. And his dog, I forget the dog's name, but his dog Porthos. That's right. A Three Musketeers reference. His dog was his humanizing connection, and it was I like that aspect. Mm-hmm. So, go ahead.
So we probably should say a word about the core triumvirate as a group.
I was just about to go into that. Go ahead.
Yeah, because in the original series, even though it wasn't planned that Kirk, Spock, and McCoy would be the core triumvirate, that's what emerged, and that's what people remembered from that series. And obviously, just like Next Gen took the original series characters and sort of remixed them, that's what we have going on here too, only it's even closer to the original series. We've still got a human captain, compassionate male human, and a logical Vulcan in the core three. What's different is that the Vulcan this time, who is first officer again, the Vulcan is a female, and the compassionate human is an engineer rather than a doctor. But other than that, it's Kirk, Spock, and McCoy.
Well, also the compassionate human in that triumvirate is also very Southern in his ways.
I forgot that. Yeah. He's less Southern than McCoy. They could have gone more south on him.
Yeah, I mean the accent very clearly. But yes.
Yeah.
I think
no, I mean not to my ear, but I'm from the South.
That's true.
No, it sounded to me like someone from the North trying to imitate a Southern accent.
Is Connor Trenier not a Southerner?
I don't know. He may be, and the accent is fine. It's just very light. It's not a strong Southern.
He's from
accent.
Washington State.
There you go.
Yeah,
okay. There you go.
Walla Walla.
So he'd have more of a Western accent naturally.
Or Northwestern, which is very different. So I agree. I like it is a mix. I kind of like the triumvirate. There was good tension as the series went on. They the two lesser parts were good supports. The opposing voices often on various things, offering various kinds of advice, that sort of stuff. There was that tension with T'Pol again, because especially in the first season, the captain couldn't completely trust her because there was a question whether she was a plant by the Vulcans to kind of,
Well, she was, but she sided with the Enterprise in the end. Right.
And that was I think it was to the benefit of the show that they kind of resolved that somewhat after the first season.
Incidentally, a behind the scenes thing that people may not be aware of is if you think back to the episode Amok Time from the original series, there's a Vulcan matriarch who everyone is in awe of named T'Pau in that episode. And she's an old woman. And originally, the creators of the show meant for T'Pol to be T'Pau as a young woman. But then they encountered backlash over that, and so they changed the name slightly. And then later in the fourth season, we get to meet the actual T'Pau. But originally, it was going to be T'Pau on the bridge of the original Enterprise, which I think would have been cool.
It would be interesting, but it might have broken some of the continuity only because the implication was that the Vulcan, the original T'Pau, didn't have a whole lot of contact with humans in the past. I think there was an implication in that.
Maybe.
Yeah, but,
Troika.
But that could have still been interesting. So I want to kind of talk a little bit about the story arcs. Because what happened is we started with, your standard introduction of, story of the week sort of stuff. But they quickly got us into a couple story arcs. But the overarching one, no pun intended, was the temporal Cold War. And
that was forced on them by the suits. That was not the writer's original idea.
And I think it was problematic because what it introduced was a very complex, like a set of futuristic factions from different time periods trying to manipulate the past because, hey, it's a show that takes place in the past from what we know. And so they it quickly became very complex and complicated. And various time travel, prevention of changing the timeline sort of stories, they become complicated and hard to follow for the viewer, the fan. And I think it was, just another one of those mistakes.
Yeah, you can tell complex time travel stories, but if you're going to do that, what you have to do is focus the viewer's attention on that.
Yes.
You can't graft it on to an Adventure of the Week thing and expect the audience to follow it.
We don't know anything about watching a show about time travel, do we?
But at least in Doctor Who, there are certain things where you can't change. It's a fixed point in time. You can't change time.
Right.
But we don't have this constant like you're changing the timeline. In fact, very often Doctor Who kind of waves at it like, well, don't worry about it.
Are you planning to kill your grandfather? Well, then don't worry about it.
Exactly. That's a future episode or past episode. I don't remember how they line up of Secrets of Doctor Who.
Timey-wimey.
It is.
Yeah.
But so the temporal Cold War was, I think, problematic. But then we got into later in the third season, they introduced the Xindi crisis. And I think that's
went on all season.
And I think that was the right direction. It was a darker storyline. And I think it sort of reflected the time period with 2003, we post 9/11, war with Iraq. I mean, it was a dark time for us in general. And so this was a storyline that began with a massive terrorist attack on Earth that killed 7 million people. And then the Enterprise was sent out to track down and stop the time traveling faction that was trying to do this.
Or alien faction that was doing it.
Right.
So I agree that, and after the first two seasons, they realized we're likely to get canceled because we're just spinning our wheels here. We've got this temporal Cold War thing that's not really working out. And other than that, it's Adventure of the Week. And we've done Adventure of the Week for years, and that's not attracting audience. So let's try a long-term story arc. Great idea. Let's try a season-long story arc. Fine. Let's totally root it in searing, painful memories that everybody has of a year ago.
Yeah. Of basically 9/11.
Not necessarily the best move. Although, frankly, I found the Xindi thing, I found it kind of boring. I was in favor of them moving in this direction. I just didn't think the execution was that great. Right. Where they really kicked into high gear, where they did get it right, was in season 4. Every show, and Next Gen had this as a problem too, especially in their early years. They want to prove how different they are from other Star Trek, and that means fewer references. So one of the directives about Enterprise is we're not going to do a lot of setup for things in the original series. I mean, we might see Andorians and Tellarites, but that's about it. And then in season 4, when Manny Coto became showrunner, it's like, let's do 3 or 4 episode mini arcs, which is a fine move. And let's have each one of them focus on setting up something we saw in the original series, like we knew about Khan and the eugenics wars, so we got the augment cycle, or we saw Orion slave women, so let's do a thing on the Orion Syndicate. And that's where they really got into, and then they started exploring a little bit the lead up to the Romulan War, and that was good. And the 4th season was where everything really started clicking, but they already knew at that time, this is basically going to be our last.
And in fact, we even got the setup for Discovery, in the 4th season with the time travel, the Mirror Universe episodes that they did.
Yeah.
Which sets up the Star Trek Discovery, which is kind of fun. I agree. I felt like at the time, I felt like Enterprise, the 4th season, was just getting good. It was like finally it was what the series I wanted.
Until the last episode.
I was just going to say that. That big stinker they dropped right at the end.
Oh, so awful.
Yeah.
So, spoiler, folks, if you haven't seen the series, the whole thing was a hologram adventure.
The last episode was a hologram story. So
Troy and Riker were playing in
the high producers, not Manny Coto, the people above him, decided they wanted, as a quote, love letter to the fans, write a final episode themselves. And so they essentially turned it into an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, where we only see Riker and Troy. And it's set during the Pegasus event, where Riker has a crisis of conscience about whose orders is he going to follow. And to sort that out, he goes into the holodeck and has this Enterprise adventure that's supposed to shed light on his own moral dilemma. And so this was, of course, wildly unpopular with the cast, who said, why are you turning our final moment of glory episode into an episode of another series?
Right.
But then they botch it beyond that, because they kill off, just for shock value, they kill off Trip Tucker for no good reason. I mean, he's been in worse situations than this and survived them. And so they kill off a character, and then they jump 5 years into the future or something to the founding of some organization, which technically isn't the Federation, but a predecessor of the Federation, and have Jonathan Archer about to make a speech inaugurating it, and then we don't get to see the speech. Right. So it's like a failure on every level.
Yeah, it's the founding of the League of Planets, which is sort of like League of Nations before the United Nations sort of thing. So yeah, I agree. I mean, they knew it was the last episode. They knew they were being canceled, and so they decided to go out with a bang, but they ended up just misfiring.
Yeah.
So
charitable way of putting it.
Yes.
One thing I do liked about it, and I think they could have done the whole episode around was going ahead to when, part of it was the original Enterprise being decommissioned, and they could have just done the story around that about, kind of done a flash through the remaining years of the Enterprise to that moment,
Yeah.
But instead they did this whole
an unseen clip show of unseen clips. I've only seen that done on Community before.
Yeah.
So I just want to kind of wrap up by just briefly touching on the rest of the crew that we really haven't talked about. We had Dr. Phlox, who was Denobulan, a species we hadn't seen before.
Good character. I liked him.
Yeah. But he was very much reminiscent of Neelix, which was another sort of that remixing of previous crews.
He was, but he was nowhere near as annoying as Neelix. He didn't.
We had Mayweather, who was basically Ensign Kim again.
Except for this time he was at the helm instead.
Yes. Yeah.
And he was, I liked the actor. He seemed like a sweet guy, but he was a really boring character.
Yes. He got a couple of Mayweather-centric episodes, mostly focusing on his family, who were afraid of. Right. I like that. It was interesting to see that in that background. We had Malcolm Reed, played by Dominic Keating, so therefore he's my favorite. No, just kidding. But the security officer.
And he got more interesting as time went along, and eventually, by the end, we find he's in Section 31.
Right. That would have been very interesting to see how that would have developed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you go ahead.
Hoshi Sato.
And then Hoshi Sato, the communications officer who speaks many languages. It's the Star Trek language problem, which is they wave their hand at all the thousands of languages that all the species speak, and we eventually get a universal translator, but you can't deal with it.
which she plays a key role in developing.
Right.
And Hoshi, I really like as a character. Hoshi, I mean, she plays a useful function. They're at least trying to address the language issue, so they have a genius level linguist dealing with it, and that's okay. But just as a character, she's the one who is most sensitive to the fact this is a brand new starship and we haven't done this before. Just how safe is all of this?
Right.
And so, she's got like fearful flyer anxiety for spaceships.
Yes.
And I thought that's totally believable and totally human. And there have been and will be people who have that. Right. And so if it makes sense, if you need like the best linguist in the world of a certain age to come on your ship, she may not otherwise be suited to gung-ho space travel. So I thought that was great.
Yes, that was good. Some recurring characters that they're Star Trek guest characters who we've seen before, like Jeffrey Combs, who was in Deep Space Nine and Voyager and Next Gen. He played the Andorian, Commander Shran. I liked getting more Andorians in this series. That was something I really enjoyed. I liked the Andorians.
And Jeffrey Combs is always great to watch. Yeah. And he was Weyoun and also Brunt on Deep Space Nine.
Brunt.
Whatever his title was.
FCA. Brunt.
Inspector Brunt. Yeah. And so he was great. They would have made, had they gotten a season 5, the plan was for him to become a regular.
Interesting.
And he was a lot of fun. I love how in this sort of moment of 23rd century or 22nd century political incorrectness, he's referring to all the Caucasians as pink skin.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like totally fine. If that's your slur, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Other characters that came out, Stephen Culp came on as Major Hayes, the future Marine, the Makos. The military force that was added to the ship,
and that I kind of like to show more of an explicit military force, because this was a time, frankly, when the United Earth was still trying to clean up the messes of the past.
Right. And it created an interesting conflict with Malcolm Reed, who was the security chief, who he felt like it was a direct challenge to his competency and capabilities. So that created an interesting story thing. Gary Graham as Ambassador Soval was on there. Another person who showed up a few times was Brent Spiner as Dr. Sung, the creator of Data, who created Data in his own image.
His ancestor.
It was like the grandfather of the creator.
Oh, right. Now that you say that, I do recall that. Yes. But anyway, a few other recurring characters. So the one interesting point, and then we'll start to wrap things up, is that Enterprise is the only live-action Star Trek series to complete its run without a change in the main cast. Original series changed with
lost Tasha Yar, and our original series we gained Chekhov.
Original series was Chekhov,
and lost Yeoman Rand.
Yeah, and Next Gen will also change Dr. Crusher and Dr. Pulaski in one season.
Yeah.
In Deep Space Nine, we had Worf added, and then we changed Jadzia to Ezri. And then Voyager. We changed
DS9, or was a 7 of 9.
7 of 9 from Kess. So the only series, although the animated series, which is not a live action, didn't have a change in its very short run either. So that was just interesting. And then last thing to mention was the technology. They didn't use the transporters. There was new technology, so they used shuttles.
By the end of it, they were using the transporters pretty freely, but it was okay in the beginning. Everyone's really hinky about these things. They're not really cleared for human use yet.
Right.
One thing a criticism that I have of the technology is, even though they made an effort to show us that this is not original series technology, they had such close surrogates. For original series technology that it just affected individual words in the dialogue. So they don't have shields, they don't have force fields to surround the ship with in battle, but they do have hull plates that for some reason have to be charged.
Right.
And so they'll Captain Archer, instead of saying shields, will be barking out power to the hull plates or something like that. And it's like, dude, it's if you're going to make it that close, there's no point.
Just call them shields.
Or better yet, don't have shields and don't have hull plates that have to be charged, and let us have more drama as a result.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That was true. They had phaser analogs, and they had everything had an analog. Phase pistols.
Yeah.
Right. Which I think look pretty cool.
And quantum torpedoes instead of photon torpedoes.
Yes, because photon is better than quantum.
With quantum phenomena.
So I think that we should wrap it up there. And of course, like with the other series we talked about, we're going to come back to the Enterprise. We'll be talking about the episode by episode and going through each of the stories. So,
that means we're going to have to do a night in sick bay.
Yes.
Another fun one.
Well, every series is going to have those episodes where we're like, do we have to? But yes, those will be the fun ones for people to listen to. That's for sure. So, I think that's it from us. So, hey, if you are that Star Trek fan who loves Enterprise, we want to hear from you. So please, or if you have anything else you want to say about the Enterprise or anything we've talked about on Star Trek, we want you to let us know. So send us an email to trek@sqpn.com, or go to sqpn.com/trek, or the SQPN Facebook page. Find the link to today's show and leave a comment there. And send us some feedback. If you want to send us some voice feedback, you can email us a voice file that you record on using the voice memo function on your smartphone would be fine. You can find links to our personal and social media websites on our show notes at sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the original pilot for the original series, The Cage. Not the Menagerie, The Cage. So until then, Father Corey Stika, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Trek.
Well, thank you very much, Dom.
Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Live long and prosper.
And once again, I'm Don Bentinelli. Thank you for listening to Secrets of Star Trek.